Hey, boys and girls, Mr. Matt. Today we're going to work on Module 14, Lesson 3, which is titled Assess Reasonableness of Sums and Differences. So I'm going to break that down for a little bit more of like a fifth grade brain here. Instead of assessing reasonableness, we're just deciding, do our answers make sense, right? We get an answer and we're using estimating to say, is this answer anywhere close to what it should be? Okay, so our I can statement says that I can use benchmarks or rounding to check the reasonableness of decimal sums and differences. So we've worked on adding and subtracting in the past, and now we're going to jump into assessing reasonableness with estimating a little bit here. Okay, so it says, Spark Your Learning, Mr. Gilbert downloads 2 files onto his computer. The table shows the sizes of the 2 files. He says that he downloads about 2 megabytes of data. So file 1 is 1 and 27 hundredths megabytes, and file 2 is 1 and 79 hundredths megabytes. So is that reasonable to say that it was about 2 megabytes? So one of the ways we could look at this is say, okay, well, let's round to the nearest whole number. So we had said first we have 1 and 27 hundredths, okay, and then the other one we said we have 1 and 79 hundredths, okay. If we're rounding on this, we would say, okay, well, let's look at 1 and look to the neighbor. This would round down to 1. Look to the neighbor. This would round up to 2. So if I combine these, I say I have about 3 megabytes. Well, if Mr. Gilbert said he had about 2 megabytes, isn't 3 close to 2? Yeah, 3 and 2 are very close to each other. So his estimate of 2 megabytes would be considered a reasonable estimate. That's the basic lesson from today, is using the rounding to estimate the sums and the differences. So if we move on to another example here, okay, let's look at this example here. And I'm going to zoom a little bit more on this one. Okay, so it says the table shows the sizes of 2 different video files. Mr. Lee says she uses Ms. Lee says that she uses 22 hundredths gigabyte more for video. File A, than the video file B, and then she uses a total of 96 hundredths gigabyte for both video files. So this talks about subtraction, and it also talks about addition. So when it says she uses 22 gigabyte more, okay, then we're talking about subtraction. So if we're looking at reasonable, well, let's look at these, okay. We have 74 hundredths and we have 52 hundredths. All right, so if we wanted to do an estimate here, we could always round to the nearest tenths place. So we have 74 hundredths, and we are subtracting 52 hundredths. Okay, if we want to round to the nearest tenth, okay, this would be 7 tenths. This would be 5 tenths. 7 tenths minus 5 tenths is 2 tenths. So we say 2 tenths, and then we have 22 hundredths. Well, if we put a 0 behind here, which is always allowed to add zeros after, that's 20 hundredths and 22 hundredths. So is the estimate of 22 hundredths gigabyte reasonable? Yes, the estimate for 22 hundredths gigabyte is definitely reasonable. When we look at the other one, when it says a total of 96 hundredths gigabytes, well, let's see. If we round these again, 74 hundredths, and then we're adding 52 hundredths, right, and we use some estimating here. Well, we're talking about whole numbers. Sorry, if we were around this again here and we said 7, all right, and we look to the neighbor, this would say is 7 tenths. Look to the neighbor, yes, we said this would say is 5 tenths. When we add these together like we did in our last lesson, we line up the decimals. 7 tenths plus 5 tenths gives me 1 and 2 tenths. So is 96 hundredths gigabytes a reasonable estimate? Okay. It's reasonable, yes, because 1 and 2 tenths is close to 96 hundredths. But when we look at these numbers, okay, we know that when we add 7 tenths and 5 tenths, that's not way too much. That is just too much. So we know that his answer is reasonable, but I would say I do not believe that his answer is correct. In order to check if his answer is correct, we would say 74 hundredths plus 52 hundredths. 4 plus 2 is 6. 7 plus 5 is 12. Carry my 1. Bring my decimal straight down. I get 1 and 26 hundredths. So again, when we test if an answer is reasonable, okay, it's not necessarily saying, is your answer right or is your answer wrong? Reasonableness means, is it close to what the answer actually should be? So we're going to do some estimating, find an estimate, and in some of the examples, we're going to also solve the problem to see if they're close, your answer is reasonable. Maybe not right, but it's still reasonable. That's what we're doing in Module 14, Lesson 3. Now, Module 14, Lesson 6 is similar as well, so I'm going to put these together in this video because Lesson 6 says to use strategies and reasoning to add and subtract. So when we look at this example for using strategies and reasoning in Module 6, so we're looking at this. Says Kyle finds 2 games that he wants to buy. What amount does Kyle pay for the 2 games? So we want to combine them together, right? We've got $15.97, and then we have $13.47. Now, we could absolutely just add these together and get our answer, but we're going to try a different little strategy for a little bit more mental math, okay? We know that $15.97 is really close to a nice, clean, whole number. That close whole number is $16, right? We're missing 3 cents to get there. If I took 3 cents from $13.47, that would leave me with $13.44. Well, for adding these mentally then, we would have 16 plus 13, which is 29, and the only decimal that we have is 44 cents. This is one of those higher level thinking type problems, which it's just one quick strategy that a lot of adults use as mental math. And you sometimes you'll hear adults say, this is that common core math, that new math that I don't understand. This is more for us to try and understand mentally to do quickly. If you're ever given an addition problem to find the total amount, do the problem. Write it down like we did here, add the columns, bring the decimal down, and be done. But if you're looking to try and mentally do these problems, this is one strategy that we could use for mental math. Okay, make a nice, clean, big whole number here by borrowing something from the other number. That makes you add 2 whole numbers, and the only decimal you have just gets plucked on there at the end. All right, another strategy that we have that we're going to use, this is a more commonly used strategy. We've got these this word problem, and I'm going to kind of I'm not going to read the whole thing, but we have these prices that we need to add together. We have $32.75, we have $11.98, and we have $24.25. Okay, so one strategy when we have to add these, yes, you could line up all the decimals like I did here and add them up. But again, if we're looking for something that's more mental math style, I know that I have 75 cents here and I have 25 cents here. When I add those together, that's another $1. So I could say 32 plus 24 is 56, plus 1 is 57. Then I have the 11s here. 57 plus 11 would equal 68. Okay, and then now I have my 98 cents. I'm going to put a plus on there. Then I have my 98 cents, so I could just say 98 cents there. So this is, again, something that's more like a mental math or a checking style. If you're ever asked to add these numbers, do it the traditional way that we've learned in the past by lining up the decimals and then adding straight down. But this is a way for us to do a little bit of a quicker mental type of a problem. And it would work if there was only 2 numbers here as well. All right. Hopefully this will help you guys with the rest of Module 14. Best of luck, and we'll talk to you soon.